So Samsung just showed us the S9 and S9 Plus, and it's got a dual aperture camera, 2.4
2.4 and 1.5.
and 1.5. And so obviously the 1.5 is geared towards low light scenarios. Adam took a bunch of shots during the demo. We weren't able to compare it to any other cameras because they actually made us tape over our own smartphones.
Unfortunately.
But we did get a bunch of shots with the S9 Plus. And now we're going to go over them, and we can learn something from what we've seen.
Yeah, there's not a ton to talk about here, especially because most of the in-depth testing, it's nice to do like a side-by-side comparisons.
Yeah.
But there's some results that as I comb through this that we can look over. So let's jump right in. This first one is just one of the nice PR people sitting in the corner. But here I was able to manually change between 2.4 and 1.5.
Okay, so what's this right here?
So I mean, it's actually not too far off in terms of exposure. I mean, really, it's not a ton to.
I was going to say, I cannot tell any real tangible differences between these two shots.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's not until you look at the actual stats here. The 1.5 was able to do a faster shutter speed at 1/20, and the 2.4 was 1/60. The only thing I could really find in this shot here is if we zoom in one more step on this little ship right here, right?
Yeah.
Not too bad on the 2.4, but the 1.5.
Oh yeah.
We'll kind of go back and forth here. The 1.5 is a little clearer, and that's because at 1/20 you kind of eliminate some handshake. So obviously the wider aperture can let more light in.
Right, that's very vivid. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean one of the things I'm worried about with the f1.5 is that when you open up the aperture that wide, you can introduce a lot of lens anomalies, and I was worried that it was going to be soft, but actually, I mean it's letting more light in, giving a higher shutter speed, and therefore having a sharper image. So that was something here
Cool.
to look at. The next one, is so most of these I put on auto mode.
Sure.
And this one, I just wanted to see what kind of choices it wanted to make. It does the usual Samsung pumping up the saturation. Obviously, that's a little more than what was actually there. I mean, it's hard to tell without comparison shots, like how crisp of an image it is compared to something else, like the Mate 10. But I mean, so far it's looking pretty nice.
So which aperture is that?
So shot? This is at 2.4. Most of the time, it tried to stick at 2.4.
Okay.
We'll go a little further. I got a little closer. Once again, 2.4. I mean, the environment we were shooting in had plenty of natural light anyway.
Yeah.
So
and those colors are super. They're like surrealistic.
Yeah. I mean, that's a Samsung thing. So
yeah.
They've definitely toned it down. So these next couple shots are interesting. This is at 2.4, and I was able to go into manual mode. I left all the settings on auto except for the aperture, which I can manually change from the 1.5
so
to 2.4.
That's offered directly in their camera app.
Yes.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah, which is nice. And so, there's not a ton to show here except for if you look at the amount of bokeh from the 2.4, and then we switch over to the 1.5, it's actually more, which makes sense. You have a wider aperture, especially at those forced perspectives. Even with such a small lens, you're still getting a lot of blur introduced. So, that's nice to see. And this isn't with the fake bokeh mode on. I actually went back and did the same shot with the bokeh mode on later, and it's not as good. So, at least you are able to see a little bit of difference in background blur with the different apertures.
And aside from the highly saturated Samsung colors, what are you seeing so far in terms of just generally image quality? I
mean, so far it's pretty standard. Once again, without direct comparison, I mean it feels like Samsung, tuning for sure. They've been with the S8. They definitely kind of tuned down some of the usual Samsung vivid colors.
Yeah.
But it feels pretty good. So we'll go on to the next couple shots. I was trying to do some really high contrast. We see a little bit of the window blown out here and then a little darker, just to see, if we got a ton of noise. And it's not really that noisy. The exposure is still good, except for, like I said, it blew out kind of where these lights were and where this is. But I don't feel like that is handling it any different than almost any other phone. So, same thing here. We get a little bit of blown out on the white here, but even in the darker areas, like right here where the cables go, I mean, there's not a ton of grain. I mean, there is some grain present, but
I can see grain. Is this the maximum? Have you zoomed in to the maximum amount?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
then that doesn't look that bad.
Yeah, it's not that bad, and this is at 2.4. So especially because they were trying to clamp down on the highlights. I think you'll be seeing a lot more photos taken with the 2.4 to tell you the truth. And then this little tight pattern, I was looking for any sort of lens anomalies, and you can kind of see a little color banding, but I think that's more from the JPEG compression, honestly, than the camera itself.
Okay.
Once again, not a ton going on here. We didn't have a real huge area to shoot stuff in, but if, one of the things I like to do is to just, especially in these blown out areas, to kind of bring down the exposure a notch and just see okay, how much information is it actually holding in the highlights. Once again, I mean, kind of like any of the other phones that we encounter, so nothing too crazy. I mean, the clarity is pretty good. You can kind of see the little print patterns. I don't know the technical term for the
moire. I mean, it's a type of moire.
Yeah. So the way it prints, but I mean, it's definitely keeping some good some good clarity here. So
yeah, actually, that could be like a 4-color process. That could be like CMYK dots. But anyway, we're getting into minutia here. Okay,
so,
what's this?
This was one of the laptops I had up for a presentation. I just wanted to see how close I could get the phone to the actual laptop. To see the kind of the minimum focus distance. And I mean, it was real close. I didn't have a tape measure, so I couldn't measure.
This
but I mean, it was only a couple inches.
Yeah.
And I focused as close to the camera as I could. So you definitely get a lot out of it.
Wow.
And it stays pretty clear. You can kind of see it's a pretty thin razor slice of focal clarity. But and once again, this is still at 2.4. Even though it clamped down to a shutter speed of 1/25, I thought maybe in this scenario it would have opened it up, and tried to get a little less shutter. But it's that's kind of what we're seeing in these tests is how is it going to make those decisions between when it stays open and when it clamps down. So this is this isn't a great shot, but it was a little darker of an area. So in auto mode, it did clamp down to 1.5, and you see even though at 1.5 it still had a shutter speed of 1/20. It didn't push the ISO too far, so we don't see a ton of grain, which is nice.
Is this an unnatural shot? Because if this was in a really dark environment, this does not look like a dark environment in the final output.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's what a lot of camera phones do is to try to say, hey, it's probably, we're trying to show you more than maybe even your eye could see at that point, which is not necessarily how I like it. But, I mean, it's also not doing anything that is overly aggressive.
Is it tuned to capture faces in dark environments? Is that part of what's going on?
I mean, that, but, I think, once again, it's just trying not to clip any of the darker parts of the image, and it doesn't. This seems to be kind of the darkest parts that I could find, and it's not coming off the end. It does feel a little soft, when it opens to 1.5, but once again, I can't. I have to dig into the testing a little bit more. I mean, the same kind of stuff. This is just a demo unit they had with the different images. So this is an interesting one. I could see it was kind of clamping down so that it didn't overexpose the really bright parts here with I'm assuming there was lights behind here.
Sure.
But you kind of lose any of the dark stuff. You see, you're starting to lose a little bit of that darkness, and you can just barely make out that Samsung. You know, luckily if I push the exposure a little bit, you know, you can still see it, and it's actually not too grainy, which is nice. You know, I'm going to push it even further, you know, and to not have like a ton of grain to push the exposure that far is actually pretty nice. So, you know, I think their noise reduction algorithm has definitely improved, which once again we'll have to test. So here I did the fake bokeh mode. You can kind of see, you know, especially, I mean, this was not a fair test necessarily because, you know, there's a lot going on here. But, you know, it still struggles. It didn't know what to necessarily cling on to. This was in the same plane of field, but, you know, this was sharp, this was not. You get these weird, almost kind of like watercolor patterns. So, you know, it'll still struggle with some stuff. Same thing here. You know, once again, not necessarily a fair test, but you can kind of see, you know, these fake bokeh modes still have a long way to go in reading depth and accurately portraying it. It is nice. You start to see a little bit of a fall off towards the edge. Like they could tell like this was closer to the camera than this. But, you know, it's still...
Yeah, that wire...
Still not great.
That piece of the wired rack is just gone.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and here's that same flower that I did with the bokeh mode turned on, which, once again, this has to use the telephoto lens, so I couldn't get the same exact kind of shot composition. But, you know, I mean, if you were to try to get something artsy, this is not necessarily what I would do. I would actually try to engage that main camera, that 1.5, and say, hey, you know, you're actually going to get some nice depth of field for items that you know that you're getting close to.
So you can go into manual mode and just choose it and get your artsy close up,
which is nice. So you know, they had a low light demo set up, which once again I was in manual mode. I left everything auto except for I switched over. So this is at 1.5, which they were trying to say, hey, you know, look, you can see in this tunnel, and look how great it is. I mean, it's the problem is that you're holding it really steady, and any phone at 1.6, you know, is still going to be like pretty good when you're holding it against something.
For the people who didn't see the demo, we were peering into this cylinder and first we peered in to see that essentially it's just a dark black cylinder.
It was very dark in there.
Yeah, and then you would put the phone camera directly on top of it. There you could see it, and then it would engage the two separate apertures. So this is at 1.5.
So this is at 1.5, and I mean they were trying to show, hey, you know, look how awesome it is when you have it such a large aperture. But then I manually switched over to the 2.4,
which is not that bad.
I mean, it's, you know, like for how dark that cylinder was, it's still not that bad.
That's crazy.
Like in some ways, I almost prefer the 2.4 one, even though it's a little noisier. You can see it bumped the ISO to 1250 rather than 1000. You know, but in some ways, you're almost getting a little more detail. You know, and especially like on the bricks right here, if you look at it.
Right, on the bricks. And like the police car. Wait, so that's 2...
This is 2.4, and this is 1.5. It's actually a little soft, you know, in a lot of ways. So, you know, that's why I was like, you know, it's kind of a weird demo because even at 2.4, you're still able to get a lot of information out of that. So I wasn't that impressed, you know. Like a lot of these phones can do great stuff.
And the real test is going to be when we can do side by side comparisons of the 1.5 aperture to other phones. Well, and in real world environments.
Well, and especially movement, you know, because here you were kind of, you know, holding the phone steady against the object, which, you know, isn't really you're taking away any of the shutter speed or any of the movement of the hand. So I mean, you know, at 1.5. It was 1/7. You know, like you're totally going to get handshake in that environment.
Yeah.
And I mean, even 1/4, like it's not increasing that much. You know, you're not getting that much out of it.
The 1.5 it creates a brighter image, but when you look at it, the 2.4 doesn't look like a big disappointment. It just looks like a great low light image.
Yeah. So
which is interesting too, because their standard aperture was 1.7 in the S8, I want to say?
No, they actually opened up to 1.6.
1.6?
Or actually, I can't remember.
We'll have to fact check that.
I think it might. It was 1.7 or 1.6. Yeah. They've definitely improved. But yeah, I mean, you can still do great stuff, you know, even with smaller apertures.
Sure.
So, you know, this is not a great shot. But I did notice something, especially when I was switching between the 1.5 and 2.4. Yes, you're getting a little bit more of an exposure here at the 2.4, but I think that's just compensating. But really, when you look up at this light at 2.4 and then you switch over to 1.5, there you start to see some of that chromatic aberration or purple fringing. You know, and hey, this is one of those things I'm gonna notice because I'm really poking it hard. But you know, like I thought, yeah, I mean, especially at wider apertures, it doesn't matter. Like I have Canon lenses that are thousands of dollars. You know, when you shoot them wide open, you can get this chromatic aberration. You know, and the same thing's gonna happen here. So you know. Whether that's a huge problem, I don't know. Once again, we'll see
what looks more realistic? You know, at the 2.4, it looks more realistic.
Yeah, right. You know, so at least I was able to kind of poke that out there. Oh, look at, and who's that?
What am I doing there?
What are you doing?
I think I was eating one of the Samsung's little treats they give journalists.
Yeah, and I was. This is back in auto mode. This one did engage the 1.5. You know, it was interesting to see.
That was relatively dark.
The hallway, you know, the mixture of natural lighting and the natural lighting and the artificial lighting, you know, that you definitely did see, like it's handling the colors pretty well. You get a little bit of color banding here on the wall, but I mean, that's going to happen in any of them. This was like one of the darker corners I could find.
I remember when you were shooting that.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't
it looked
trying
really
to get
dark when I was like, okay, that's going to be a dark shot. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, but it holds up pretty well. You know, that's
1.5.
You know, it's not a great photo. Obviously, I was just trying to test
it gets pretty soft,
the low light. Yeah. But you know, it's not too noisy either, which is nice. You know, a couple of the demo shots, I was just looking at the clarity on the sand, and I mean, once again, that looks pretty.
That's on 2.4.
Pretty clear. Yeah. So yeah, and then the nice little
I don't remember those
macaroons, however you pronounce them.
Macaroons.
Yeah. You know, it looks nice. And then I took one because
awesome.
Yeah. So I mean that's pretty much it. You know, like we didn't have a ton of time, and obviously we're gonna do more. But,
right.
You know, I mean I think Samsung has always had, you know, one of the top handful of cameras every year, and I don't see this changing anything. I think this is going to be great. Really, the big question for me is, you know, trying to understand when it's going to switch between the 2.4 and the 1.5, and what problems you might run into to have such a wide aperture at 1.5. You know, that's kind of what I'll be looking
Chromatic
at. So.
aberrations.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much, Adam.
Yep.
Obviously, this was just the first round of testing during a hands-on.
Just real quick, yep.
We're going to get the phone and compare it to the Mate 10 Pro.
Yeah, the Huawei Mate 10 Pro,
yep.
Our current champ. So.
Our current champ. Okay, so check back soon.
Thanks, guys.